In every discussion that involves the broad topics of religion, the supernatural, and atheism, one argument is bound to come up. After an atheist makes the inevitable point that religious belief has caused untold suffering, this of course saying nothing about whether religious doctrine is true or not, someone will respond with the point, but atheists did it too. This is generally in reference to 20th century dictatorships that were implicitly or explicitly anti-religion. I will start by briefly pointing out that if the last line of defense for religion is to say, but everyone is doing it, then it wasn't much of a defense. However, this video is intended to clear up a broader misconception, that atheism causes as much evil as religion. To do so, I intend to argue two things, one after the other. First, that certain harmful properties are required in a government for it to cause the kind of mass oppression and violence that we're talking about. And second, that these properties are necessary parts of religion while not being necessary to atheism. That is to say, while it's possible for atheism as a worldview to exist without these properties, and thus without their disastrous outcomes, it is impossible for religion as we know it to exist without some or all of these properties. The thread that ties them all together is an unwarranted doctrine, belief without evidence, or pretty much any time dogma trumps a known fact about reality. If the peer review process of science can be overruled in favor of a doctrine for which there is no real-world evidence, then there will be real-world negative outcomes. So let's get to the list. Number 1. Unwarranted religious beliefs about the causes of homosexuality, disease, natural disasters, and AIDS transmission are essentially equivalent to the Stalinist doctrine of communist genetics, in which his lead scientist Lysenko, a scientific charlatan, assured the country that by adhering to communist principles, more food could be grown. The resulting failed crop doomed millions to die of starvation. When certain positions must be accepted with a basis only in wishful thinking, the door is open for terrible outcomes when reality comes barging in. Humans act in the real world based on our beliefs, whether those beliefs are derived from the real world or not. 2. Whenever a bright future is promised to account for present hardship or atrocities, but only through faithfulness to certain unproven doctrines, the promised land, the restoration of the perfect Aryan race, heaven, communism's perfect society, etc. This strings people along and gives them something to look forward to when life, often a lifestyle imposed by the ideology itself, doesn't seem fair. Conveniently enough, since the bases of the doctrines can neither be confirmed nor denied, it is always possible for the leaders to explain a lack of success by just saying, "We just weren't trying hard enough." Third, doctrines that certain groups of people can somehow be inherently good or bad, regardless of action on their part, in some cases blaming their ancestors. Hundreds of generations after the fact, Jewish people were still regarded as evil Christ killers, or simply inferior by religious and non-religious regimes alike. And slavery was justified because blacks were sons of Ham to the religious, or genetically inferior. Later on, while in contrast, the doctrine of Nazi Germany, and of most religious institutions, is that members are of a chosen people. Psychological data show clearly that depersonalizing or dehumanizing someone by making him part of an outgroup makes violence and bigotry against that person easier. Number 4. Whenever illogical, incomprehensible, or non sequitur positions are demanded as articles of faith, or as Orwell puts it in the novel 1984, doublethink. For instance, the Christian God is both 3 persons and 1 person. Kim Jong-il and his father are somehow the same person. That Jesus was both fully human and fully divine. That the Eucharist is both bread and also human flesh, etc. If there are certain subsets of questions that cannot even be answered properly, the population learns more easily to simply not ask difficult questions at all. It's a process called transfer of training, in which a certain pattern of thinking, when ingrained through practice, becomes easier in other aspects of life. Fifth and finally, whenever men are allowed to assume divine or infallible positions. Although North Korea is an avowedly atheist state, Kim Jong-il is regarded as a holy figure, infallible and divine, at whose birth there were miraculous events. Most impoverished North Koreans actually believe that humanitarian aid given to them is holy sacrificial offerings from other countries to Kim Jong-il, almost their god. An inability to question the leader's judgment is dangerous no matter what the leader's position is. Men simply are not infallible. It's just not true. Ever. And they will make real-world mistakes if allowed a free rein to make decisions by themselves, with no oversight. As you can see, all worldviews may have qualities that lead to an oppressive regime, but only religion possesses them by necessity, dormant catalysts that do nothing by themselves but are required for oppression. While a humanistic atheism can recognize its mistakes and change based on that evidence, religion is notoriously slow to change doctrine, when it does so at all. For instance, Jews were all guilty of deicide, the murder of a god, in the eyes of the Catholic Church until the 20th century. Keep in mind that atheism is not a doctrine, but rather it is any worldview that does not specifically affirm a deity. If it makes more sense to you, you can think of this as naturalism or humanism instead, but the three worldviews have massive overlap. Most so-called atheists are also a-fairyists, a-unicornists, and a-pink elephantists. The cultural climate just doesn't make them acknowledge this. The point, though, is that these positions have nothing inherent about them that discourages questioning. With any view of the supernatural, though, there are always some questions that simply cannot be asked, or if they can be asked, are forever barred from having satisfactory answers. This inevitably makes it more likely, if only slightly, that religion will cause problems. It inculcates a mindset of obedience without question. Metaphorically speaking, the existence of an oppressive government is like the process of vision. If you're not careful, you might make the mistake of saying the sun is necessary for vision. You have to realize that it's not the sun we need for vision, it is a specific property of the sun, light, which is available from other sources, like a light bulb. In the same way, it is the properties of religion that are necessary for a violent and oppressive regime, properties which are available from other sources. Luckily, those properties in atheism, like light in a light bulb, can be turned off. The light switch in this metaphor is simply the freedom to question authority. Metaphors are imperfect, so that is as far as I'm going to take this one. The very mindset of unquestioning credulity is the true dangerous thing, and all religions possess some point at which questions must stop being asked. Anticipating one obvious argument, I agree that not all religious societies are instantly dangerous, but to put it in those black and white terms is to engage in a misleading false dichotomy. Not being a full-fledged oppressive regime does not alleviate all problems. It's not an either-or situation. It is a question of degree, of what makes oppression and violence more likely. Regardless of what beliefs, religious or otherwise, are held by a society, the important question seems to be, to what extent does the society allow questioning? Some religions are more liberal in the sense that they allow more questions, and to that extent they are healthier religions, but there is no such thing as a religion that allows all questions the way a secular worldview does. Anticipating another argument, it is nonsensical to claim that your religion, institutional or personal, allows questioning if the questions are unanswerable, or if the answers to those questions are meaningless vagueness about we must have faith, or holy mystery, or worst of all, wouldn't it be nice if it were true? Such belief without evidence is a dangerous relic of the past. And in anticipating one more argument, when I say allowing questioning, I do not mean the abolition of the rule of law. I would advocate a democratic rule of law whereby the people decide the laws, but without the influence of baseless, unverified claims about the nature of the universe. However, I would never advocate this by force, only by the method I'm using now, reason. If I have advocated anything in this video, it is a passive, rational spread of ideas from the bottom up, rather than a top-down use of force. I don't have one ideal, perfect society in mind, but based on the information I've seen so far, I think the most prudent policy to aim for in all countries would be one of freedom and of education, encouraging understanding and rational discussion. To quote Sam Harris, I know of no society in human history that have ever suffered because its people became too reasonable. Peace.